Characters who join late in Fire Emblem are often overlooked for a variety of factors. We spend the entire game training, raising, and getting to know our favorite characters who have been with us since the beginning. If you've already been training Silas for several chapters, why would you want to replace him with Perry? Also, in the past, even late joining pre-promotes were often looked down on. This habit of underrating a late joining hero or paladin has gotten better in recent years. We now understand that sometimes these characters who join late at a high level of power have the advantage that they are strong enough in combat to carry you into the late game without needing a painful early game training arc. Henry is an interesting case. He falls somewhere between these two extremes because he's not actually that good at combat, but like so many characters in Awakening, he has this very unique unit identity that makes him special in his own way. He's really great at performing very specific roles that don't even necessarily exist in other Fire Emblem games. Henry is a top-tier support partner as far as first-generation characters go, and he might even be the ideal husband for several candidates. He's a great dad who passes down some seriously valuable assets to his child in the form of skills or class access, probably one of the best dads in the game. His class set is really wide, but it's also really weird. But the thing is, all of his available classes give him these useful options for either inheritance or for supporting others. And because he joins late, he starts at a bit of a disadvantage when it comes to building supports. But as a support unit, starting at level 10 or above level 10 is one of the best possible advantages you can have, and Henry joins right at level 12 in one of the better supporting classes. Being a late joiner is both a good thing and a bad thing. In many Fire Emblem games, especially the earlier games, characters who joined late, replacement units, were often worse than their early counterparts. This was seen as a bit of a punishment in an Iron Man context that the games were meant to be played in, that nobody really plays them that way. But if you let Alan and Lance die early on, your punishment is that you have to use Noah or Trek later. But is that actually true for Henry? The thing about Awakening is that characters don't need to be good at combat. They can contribute in other ways outside of that. And that massively changes the equation for these late joining characters. Henry's combat certainly is not going to be as good as a trained Robin, but he can still contribute to the team as a support partner, a husband, or a father. So let's compare him not to Robin, but to Kellam, who is often considered a great early game support partner and has a lot of similarities with Henry. Kellam gives a lot of defense and a little bit of strength, which is very nice for physical characters who already have enough speed or who just need a little bit of those extra stats. If he could pair up with Sumia, they would make the ideal couple, I think, and they join in the same chapter too. But anyway, the fact that Knight doesn't give any speed isn't really a big deal because neither does Dark Mage. So if we're comparing Kellam to Henry, we can just check and see that Dark Mage is very similar and ignore the fact that they both give 0 speed. Giving a bit of magic and a little bit of defense is also great. This is fantastic for magical characters who already have enough speed. Hey, where have we heard that before? Kellam starts with 10 strength and 12 defense. This is enough to boost these stats even higher to +5 and +3 strength respectively on pair up, and it's not too difficult to get a C rank with any character that you want early on. So Kellam can reasonably give +6 defense and +4 strength on a pair up. In the early game, when your best tanks are still going to have around 15 defense or less, a +6 defensive boost is huge, and the enemy HP is still low enough that an extra +4 strength is also very notable. Henry gets the same treatment, although his stats again reflect his slightly more offensive weighting. But he's a surprisingly bulky character, and he's very much a mirror image of Kellam, starting with 15 magic and 14 defense. He also gets a nice +1 bonus to each of the stats that he grants on pair up. Since you're already about halfway through the game, the opportunity cost of building a C support is a little bit more demanding, because many of your established characters already have A rank or S rank support partners, and so finding a place for Henry on the team might be difficult if you've been building a full team. But let's ignore that. You can still reasonably get +5 magic and +5 defense from a Henry pair-up. Enemy stats are going to be higher at this point in the game, so this +5 is worth a little bit less, but those are still very impressive pair-up stat lines when he joins. Henry also starts much closer to having 20 in those stats, which is a benchmark that will boost them even further on pair up, and Henry has another advantage, actually several other advantages. Because Henry starts at level 10, he can promote or reclass right away, and this is the main massive advantage that he has over Kellam, and his strongest ability, in my opinion, as a supporting character. You see, in theory, Kellam's ability to reclass into Thief allows him to give speed to his partner, or he can use Priest to give magic and resistance to that partner. But in practice, it doesn't really work that way for Kellam. He joins the team at level 5, and this means you would have to find some way to train him for 5 additional levels before he can use any of these ceiling options. This early in the game, your ability to train project units is pretty limited because there's a very high demand for the amount of experience that can be funneled into your best characters. And to make matters worse, even if you decide that Kellam is the highest priority and you want to feed him as much experience as possible, he's still a difficult character to train. Lances aren't the worst weapon type, but they are certainly not the best. His only option for attacking at 2 range is the Javelin, a weapon that only has 2 attack power, and if he's holding it, this means that Frederick, Sumia, and Cordelia are not holding it. Now you can buy more Javelins after a little while, but they're expensive compared to tomes or bows. If Kellam remains paired up all of the time, he will sometimes dual strike and sometimes gain experience. But this process is slow, especially if you're going from level 5 to level 10. And when you want to rotate him into the lead, he runs a serious risk, because he's always forced to attack at 1 range, and that means there's a smaller group of enemies that he can safely attack for chip damage, and even if he's going to secure a kill, you have to weigh the odds that if Kellam misses, the counterattack could potentially kill him, so that makes him capable of fighting even fewer combats. And that's not to say that Kellam is bad or that he's unusable, but this is one of his disadvantages when you're comparing him against Henry. If you leave Kellam in the backup position and only benefit from that +6 defense and +3 strength, that's really nice. And you can leave him as a knight. You can gain very minor chip experience for a while. By the time he finally reaches 10, you'll likely have access to infinitely viable Master Seals, so you're not having to worry about limited early game Master Seals. But still, Henry looks much more appealing in this regard because you only have the option of staying in Knight for 5 levels, compared to Henry, who can switch as soon as you want. And here's the other thing, if you do want to train Henry, tomes are giving him the advantage of being able to attack at 1 or 2 range with better attack power than the Javelin. There are many 1 range locked enemies that Henry can safely attack for chip damage with 0 risk, and this gives him so many more opportunities to train. And because he's more offensively weighted than Kellam, despite also being a defensive character, and because enemies with very low resistance exist in this game and they're very common, he's going to have more opportunities to actually defeat weakened enemies for even more boosted experience that you get when you kill an enemy. But even more than that, Henry doesn't even need to be trained. Continuing to be a mirror of Kellam in many ways, Henry's reclass set allows him to do virtually the same things. Starting as a magic boosting support, Henry has the ability to reclass into a thief to give speed to his ally, we've heard that before, or reclass into a barbarian, which actually gives strength and speed to his ally. The difference here is that because Henry starts above level 10, there's no training cost for this. You can pick literally any character that you want to be Henry's support partner, and switch Henry immediately into the class out of this group, which benefits that partner. But stacking another advantage on top of this, Henry has even more qualities that put him ahead of Kellam even further. He starts with Hex and Anathema. These are very high tier support skills that you've probably heard me talk about and gush about many times in my previous guide and my previous build videos. And because Henry starts with these skills, he can take them into any class that he wants, any class that his partner wants. Become a Hex Anathema supporting Barbarian, Thief, Dark Knight, Sorcerer, Trickster, Assassin, Berserker, Warrior, and yes, that actually brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. As if Henry didn't have enough advantages already, joining immediately at level 12, and joining the team 1 chapter before you have access to infinitely viable Master Seals, this means that Henry can be promoted right away to either Sorcerer or Dark Knight. The pair-up stats from Dark Knight completely destroy anything that Kellam offers on his join time, and I realize it's later in the game, but that's also the point. Henry can do all of this without needing to spend the time training in the early game that Kellam needs to spend. Kellam has to steal experience from Vake, Robin, Sully, Virion, Frederick, and everyone else. Henry doesn't steal experience from anyone. He joins with the right level that he needs to do his job. As a Dark Knight, with just a C support, he gives +4 magic, +5 defense, +3 resistance, and +1 movement. Remember that Kellam's main selling point is that he gives +6 defense and +3 strength with just a C support. The only way that Kellam could give a comparable bonus to Henry would be if he joined at level 10 and could promote to Great Knight right away, but he can't do that. So in conclusion, Henry's later join time is more than made up for by the fact that he joins at this perfect level to play a supporting character for the rest of the game. And if he looks this good when you compare him against one of the best early game supports, that is saying a lot about Henry's potential. Now, let's talk about the wide range of characters that Henry can reasonably support with to great effect. Among the more obvious candidates are characters like Lissa. Although her speed is neither great or terrible, and certainly a speed support would help her, the reality is that in his most basic form, Henry gives her much of what she needs, boosting the range of her rescue staff, increasing the damage of her magical attacks to help with chipping or eliminating enemies on player phase on turns when she's not using a staff, and even increasing her defense by a measurable enough margin that she can maybe survive an attack that would have one-shot her, or survive one or possibly even 2 attacks if she needs to act as an anchor during the enemy phase. On top of the value of these pairings, Henry also works as a fantastic dad for several of the second generation units. So if you pair him with Lissa, this gives Owain access to Dark Mage. It's one of the most low effort ways to have a Nosferatu tank with Vantage. Lissa is going to be on your team from the beginning of the game and gains experience purely by using her staff. Henry joins already at a level where he can promote or reclass into whatever you need. Once he builds his support with Lissa, Owain's Paralog becomes available, and it's not extremely difficult to beat this Paralog and to recruit Owain. Owain joins with Vantage, and he can even inherit Vengeance from Henry with relatively low effort. If you reclass Owain into Dark Mage on his joining chapter, you literally have a Vantage Vengeance build already completed. And much of the work here was thanks to Henry, and all of the value he provides as both a support partner and as a father. Brady and Na both would be happy to get our access to the Dark Mage class, and Henry supports Maribel in much of the same way as Lissa, but his support with Noe highlights the strength of Henry's versatility. Are you able to get Noe into the Sage class? If you can do that, you can just stick with Sorcerer or Dark Knight as your pair-up option, allowing Henry to boost Noe's magic, defense, and possibly even her movement. If Noe's struggling to deal damage and she's struggling to train while using her Dragonstone, Henry can change into a Barbarian and give +5 strength or more to Noe easily. And this even helps Noe with her speed problems as well, giving a slight boost to her speed that's going to help her avoid being doubled by so many enemies in the mid-game and the late game. We've talked about how Sumia would be great together with Kellam if the option was available, and how sad that it's not, but Henry is just the magical version of Kellam, and Sumia can pair up with him. She already has enough speed that she's likely self-sufficient, but a bit of extra magic and defense, and even potentially movement, that would really help her when she's training and fighting as a Dark Flyer. Cynthia's stats are pretty neutral, weighted towards speed, but not particularly favoring strength over magic. With Henry as a father, this nudges Cynthia in the direction of a good magical character, while giving her access to Dark Mage if you want to go that route. Dark Mage is very often viewed as a powerful enemy phase class thanks to the sweeping potential of Nosferatu, but honestly, between the Ruin Tome, the Mire Tome, and the Flux Tome, Dark Mage is just a good class, period. It's great for enemy or player phase action, and the fact that Cynthia can inherit Gale Force while having the option to play as a sorcerer has a lot of potential. One of the tricky aspects of playing as a Dark Mage is that the tomes are so very strong, but also expensive and situational. Being able to blast an enemy to pieces with the Ruin Tome, trigger Gale Force, and then reposition while switching to either equip the Nosferatu Tome for enemy phase healing is a serious benefit that shouldn't be overlooked. And similarly, if you need to use the Nosferatu Tome for some emergency healing, but you want to switch back to another tome after you attack, so you're not wasting more Nosferatu charges for the entire enemy phase, Gale Force could also allow you to do this. The same logic applies to the Mire Tome, where typically you only want to use one charge and then switch to something less valuable for enemy phase sweeping. A lot of times I have to have a character run up and trade with the character to swap around their inventory, but Gale Force is surprisingly useful as just an inventory management and resource management tool, on top of all the power that it gives you of an offensive, momentum-boosting skill. Ironically, Miriel might be among Henry's worst partners, because they both give something that is extremely valuable to other characters, but they themselves already have. I'm not going to say this pair is completely awful, but just remember that Laurent already has access to Dark Mage. Miriel already has plenty of magic. The only value in pairing Henry and Miriel together would be maybe you're already using Miriel as a Sage or a Valkyrie, and you want to give her the benefits of Henry's Hex and Anathema without needing to send Miriel into Dark Mage herself. That's a pretty specific situation, but it will come up in some team building scenarios. But I actually rate several of the physical first generation characters above Miriel in terms of how much they want to gain from pairing up with Henry. Sully, Cordelia, Church, and Pan all benefit from the value of Hex and Anathema if you're planning to use them, and out of this group, only Cordelia can go into Dark Mage herself, but she wouldn't want to do that. The true power of Henry in these specific couples is his Barbarian access. Again, the power to give +5 strength and +3 speed while scaling these stat bonuses even higher over time is pretty incredible on a character who comes with Hex and Anathema. You might think that Henry isn't a physical character, and I don't know, maybe he's not, but he absolutely has the support class option that he needs to boost a physical attacking partner. The strength bonus from Barbarian is comparable to most of the promoted physical classes, so even if he just sits there as a level 1 Barbarian, Henry is still giving a substantial bonus to the offensive power of his wife. The fact that Barbarian also gives a speed bonus on pair-up when speed is the most valuable stat in the game makes this reclassing even better. The biggest opportunity cost here is the second seal that you need to give Henry, but it won't be long after he joins before you have the ability to buy second seals, so this won't be a major issue. Out of the characters I mentioned above and their children, I'd like to give a special mention to Jerome. Barbarian access is one of the things that he really wants, and he can get it from Henry, and his strength mod is naturally high enough that even if he has a magical father, like Henry, it doesn't hurt him too much. He'd also be happy to inherit either Hex or Anathema if you're going for a low investment pairing, and because Church and Henry both join later on, they can start building support with each other instead of needing to attach to a character that probably already has another A support or an S support that you built up during the early game. Now, for a fun, off-meta build, Henry synergizes really well with Church's ability to reclass into a Cleric or a Troubadour, because Henry's magical bonuses will increase her staff utility, making it more valuable to use her instead of just having her in a staff class for training purposes. While the magic and speed bonus from Troubadour actually help Henry fight more effectively in the Sorcerer class or as a Dark Knight. This is effectively using 2 character slots for the value of a single utility character in a single action per turn on most turns, and it does require a bit of investment to make sure that the couple actually reaches their S support in a reasonable amount of time. On top of the cost of the second seals for both characters, I'm not going to say that this off-meta build is cheap, but the Jerome you get later on is going to be very strong as a dual strike pair-up unit, potentially with Anathema and dual support plus, on top of the skills that he can learn from Fighter and Barbarian. Remember that offensive skills like Luna and Astra can't activate when you're dual striking, but critical hits can. Building Jerome as a character with a high crit rate, a high dual strike rate, and the ability to boost the crit rate of his partner will give him very high potential as an offensive, supporting, dual-striking unit. If you're going to pair up Henry with Sully, Pan, or Cordelia, or even Church though, I really recommend sticking with a physical line, and don't try anything too off-meta unless you're trying to be funny. Make Henry into a Barbarian when you have the extra seal, and just let Sully or Pan benefit from his strength and his speed bonus, which, the more you build supports, the more stats that Henry gains. This bonus can eventually reach an impressive +9 strength and +7 speed. If Henry does eventually reach a level 10 Barbarian, the bonus can extend even further by promoting him into Berserker. The magic in Henry is actually in his weird class set. I'll admit, there's rarely a reason to go into Thief unless you're just trying to pass down Lock Touch, but there is value in having both Trickster and Assassin. And we've already discussed the numerous examples where Henry's ability to either become a Barbarian or give Barbarian access to his son or Dark Mage access to his son really starts to add up. It goes without saying that Henry makes a great partner for Robin, and honestly, it feels like the only characters that Henry does not match up well with are the Muriel that we mentioned earlier and Saria, who just has too much overlap with Henry. Every other partner feels like they have A tier or S tier potential, and most of them have at least A tier immediate synergy on top of that strong potential just by giving them Henry as a partner. Some pairings allow Henry to instantly join the team and immediately make his partner elevate to a new level of power, like Henry with Sumia. In a no-grinding context, this is a lot of value that Henry can generate in both the short term and the long term. Recently, I made a poll asking people if they favor support classes that give a wide range of stats, a very high bonus in one important stat, or support classes that give a movement bonus. Well, opinions were a bit split up, but the fun thing about Henry is that he has the ability to play any of these roles, and because he starts as a level 12 character, you have the freedom to reclass him into whichever role you need, or whichever role you like using, right away. From magic, defense, and movement, to speed and movement, to just pure strength, with a bit of speed on the side as a bonus. One of Henry's other strongest niches, which is derived from his high starting level, is his ability to patch up a team that's missing members. If you play an early game that is heavily focused on Robin, Crom, and Frederick, you might get to chapter 12 with only these 3 characters trained up. On top of the other free units like Anna, Libra, and Church, that's still only 6 out of 12 deployment slots. We can add Olivia, Lissa, even Maribel to this list, and we still have 3 empty places on the team. If you've barely trained anyone else, this level 12 Henry with his lunatic mode bonuses can actually look really appealing as a utility flex character. At least when you compare him to the idea of taking level 1 Muriel or level 3 Rickon off the bench. I think Saria is a little better all around, but there's no reason you can't use both, and I actually think Henry is better as a pure support unit. Now, is Henry ever going to be the star player in your run? Probably not, unless you go very far out of your way to make that happen. But as a member of the support group, he is someone that I have personally underrated in the past, to a great extent, and for a very long time. And I've only recently come to appreciate how good he actually is. Maybe he's not S tier, but not everyone can be, and his ability to boost his partners to bring them closer to the S tier, or to help make second generation S tier builds is something. It's not completely intangible, it's not completely impossible to measure, but it's often something we overlook. We like to see someone hit a home run. We like to see someone pitch a strikeout. But Henry is like the guy on the bench or on the coaching staff. He helps the star players reach that potential so they can perform, and they look much better in front of the crowd. Even though they never know about the contributions that Henry has made to the team, I feel like Henry is standing backstage and bowing, while the audience is clapping for everyone else. And I think that's worth recognizing too. So if you're playing Fire Emblem Awakening again in the future, if you have an empty spot on your team, if someone needs a good pair-up partner, or you want to make a cracked second generation build, consider trying out Henry. His combat, if you try to make him fight, it's going to feel underwhelming. But if you think of him purely as a support character, as a team-building asset, you might come to appreciate the strengths that he does offer outside of direct combat. And if you like this video, consider pressing one of those buttons down there or leaving a comment. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day.